the tragic and haunting story of Amara Bennett's murder, justice and closure. It was a crisp early autumn morning in 2023, in the quiet town of Theodore Springs, Oregon. As the first rays of the sun stretched across the valley, the sleepy streets began to awaken. Early commuters began their daily routines, the familiar hum of car engines and distant voices filling the morning air. Children, their backpacks slung over their shoulders, eagerly headed to school, excited for the day ahead. And in the midst of it all, Amara Bennett, a dedicated mother of 3, laced up her sneakers for her regular morning jog. The air was crisp, the kind that carries a hint of the changing seasons. It was the perfect temperature, cool enough to invigorate her, but not cold enough to make her feel chilled. The town of Theodore Springs, nestled at the foot of towering trees and surrounded by winding rivers, felt serene, untouched. There was a peace here, an undeniable calm that seemed to permeate every corner of the town. For Amara, this jog was her time, a time to clear her mind, to embrace the stillness and to recharge for the day ahead. She didn't always have time to herself, but this was the one routine she made sure to keep. It was her sanctuary. The familiar Riverwalk trail was the perfect place, winding through the dense woods, following the river's path, and offering a sense of escape from the noise of daily life. Amara had been a mother for nearly 15 years. Her life had always been about her children: Isaiah, her teenage son; Ella, her energetic 10-year-old daughter; and Maya, her youngest, a curious and thoughtful 6-year-old. The bond between Amara and her children was unbreakable. Her love for them was fierce, protective, and limitless. In her neighborhood, Amara was known for her warmth, energy, and strength. She had a magnetic presence that drew people to her, her laughter echoing through rooms, her kindness unwavering. She was always the one who made sure everyone was taken care of, the one who baked cookies for school events, attended PTA meetings, and made sure no one ever felt left out. Her marriage to Jalen Bennett, a quiet but loving man who worked as a local contractor, was strong. Together they had built a life filled with love, laughter, and the occasional chaos that comes with raising 3 children. Amara was not only the heartbeat of her family but also the glue that kept everything together. That morning, as she jogged along the Riverwalk trail, her thoughts drifted to the usual worries: the upcoming parent-teacher conference, the grocery shopping, and making sure Ella finished her math homework. But as she rounded the bend by the river, all of those worries seemed to fade away. The rustling leaves and the gentle current of the river created a calming soundscape. Amara felt at peace at home in her own skin. But little did Amara know, this routine run would soon turn into a nightmare, one that would forever change her family's life and haunt the town of Theodore Springs. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Hours passed, and by mid-morning Jalen began to worry. Amara was usually home by now, but there was no sign of her. He texted her once, then twice. No response. He called, but it went straight to voicemail. His heart began to race. This wasn't like Amara. She never left without telling him where she'd be. Jalen's first instinct was to wait, to give her a little more time. After all, she was always on time, so surely something must have come up. But as the afternoon wore on, a sense of unease grew within him. He tried calling again. Nothing. No answer. He called Amara's best friend, Tasha, to see if she had heard from her. When Tasha confirmed she hadn't, Jalen's worry turned into full-blown panic. Amara's children, sensing something was wrong, began to ask questions. Isaiah, the eldest, could sense his father's unease and immediately began pacing around the house. Ella, ever the sensitive one, began to cry, asking where her mom was. Maya, too young to fully understand, kept asking when mommy would be home. Jalen didn't have the answers. He couldn't answer their questions, couldn't calm their growing fears. As the hours stretched into the evening, Jalen felt the weight of the world pressing on him. Amara had been gone far too long. Something was terribly wrong. By the time night fell, Jalen had called the police. The search began. The town of Theodore Springs, which had always been quiet and safe, was now in turmoil. Jalen's voice broke as he spoke to the officers, trying to explain how this wasn't like Amara, how she wouldn't just leave without a word. The police arrived at the house within the hour, speaking with Jalen and gathering all the information they could. A search of the immediate area began, and soon after, volunteers from the community began arriving at the Bennett household. The quiet, peaceful town was now thrust into chaos, as neighbors, friends, and strangers alike rallied together, searching every corner of Theodore Springs for any sign of Amara. By the next morning, news of Amara's disappearance had spread beyond the town. The local news station arrived to cover the story, and the national media soon picked up the case. It wasn't long before cameras from outside the town turned their lenses on the quiet streets of Theodore Springs. People across the began following Amara's story. Her disappearance had become a mystery, a tragedy that no one could have foreseen. Jalen's desperation grew with every passing minute. The hours felt like days as the search efforts expanded. Law enforcement and volunteers combed the nearby trails, local parks and forests, hoping for any sign of Amara. Friends and family distributed flyers and spread word across social media, trying to connect any dots. But still there was no sign of Amara. No clues. No answers. Then, on the second day of the search, a breakthrough. A group of volunteers combing the Riverwalk Trail found Amara's phone, lying abandoned in the dirt. Her headphones were nearby, ripped from her ears, but it was the sight of her water bottle left so carefully on the ground that sent a chill down the spine of every searcher. There were no signs of a struggle. The trail seemed untouched, as if nothing had happened. Yet, the belongings were evidence that something had gone terribly wrong. Whoever had taken her had gone to great lengths to ensure she hadn't left willingly. The trail, once a place of serenity, now felt sinister. Amara had disappeared without a trace. The peaceful town of Theodore Springs was now at the center of a growing mystery, and the question on everyone's mind was, who took Amara Bennett and why? As the search continued, investigators began reviewing surveillance footage from nearby businesses and traffic cameras. Was there anyone who had seen something suspicious? Was there any clue that could lead them to the truth? Don't forget to subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. With every hour that passed, the investigation ramped up. Local law enforcement, led by Detective Carla Simmons, was quickly joined by FBI agents to aid in the search. The town's police force, though diligent, was small, and the complexity of the case required more resources. With Amara's phone found, they knew they had to act fast. There was no time to waste. The police had initially hoped for a simple case. A missing person who had perhaps lost track of time or taken an unexpected detour. But the discovery of her belongings, scattered deliberately along the trail, told a far more disturbing story. This wasn't just the case of someone getting lost. Amara had been taken. The team of investigators worked quickly to secure and analyze Amara's phone. They sent it to forensic experts who began the painstaking process of pulling information from her device. Her recent messages, calls, and even location data could provide crucial clues. Every piece of technology Amara used was combed over, hoping it would point them in the right direction. Meanwhile, the search for Amara stretched beyond the Riverwalk Trail. Helicopters flew over the surrounding woods, their blades cutting through the early morning fog, but still nothing was found. The local parks, the nearby forests, and even the residential areas were scoured. Jalen Bennett, Amara's husband, joined the search teams. Every step felt like a new weight on his chest. The thought that his wife, the woman who had always been there for him, the woman who had never once left without saying goodbye, could be in danger, it was something he couldn't fathom. His mind raced as he walked the trails, searching with his own hands for any sign of her. Despite the increased presence of volunteers, there was still no sign of Amara. Her absence hung over the town like a cloud, suffocating everyone who cared for her. Her children, especially Isaiah, the eldest, clung to the hope that she would return. But each day without her made that hope harder to hold on to. Then came the breakthrough. Late on the second day of the search, a witness came forward. Kyle Thompson, a local resident, had been out walking his dog with his girlfriend when they noticed something unusual. As they passed the woods near the Riverwalk Trail, they saw a man standing off to the side. He was tall with dark hair, wearing a black hoodie and sunglasses despite the early morning light. What stood out, however, was his strange behavior. Kyle said the man was carrying a large backpack and had a shovel in his hand. Kyle's description of the man was enough to catch the attention of investigators. It was vague but pointed. The man's presence near the trail, coupled with his suspicious actions, raised serious questions. Could this person be involved in Amara's disappearance? Was this the man who had taken her? Kyle and his girlfriend had not been able to get a clear look at the man's face, but the suspicion that had crept into their minds would not leave. The man was described as broad-shouldered, around 6 feet tall, with a scruffy beard. It was the type of description that law enforcement could work with, and it immediately became the lead they needed. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. The presence of this witness marked a turning point in the investigation. Detective Simmons and her team took the information seriously. The description was enough to focus the investigation on a potential suspect. The police began to dig into local records to see if anyone in the area fit the description. They spoke to local businesses and combed through security footage from nearby stores, hoping to find something that would place this mysterious man near the Riverwalk Trail or give them a better idea of who he was. But the more they searched, the more elusive the suspect became. No one seemed to recognize him. The details, though vivid, didn't point to any known individual in the town. It seemed as though this man had appeared out of nowhere. At the same time, forensic experts were working on the DNA collected from Amara's belongings. With a DNA sample taken from her phone case, headphones and water bottle, law enforcement hoped to find a match to someone in the criminal database. It wasn't long before the forensic team made a startling discovery. The DNA evidence linked a name to the crime scene: Gabriel Alvarez. Gabriel Alvarez, a 32-year-old man originally from California, had moved to Theodore Springs just months before Amara's disappearance. Though there were no known connections between him and Amara, his background soon raised alarms. Alvarez had a criminal history, including past charges related to assault and burglary. But the most troubling piece of information was his recent history of erratic behavior. The police began to investigate his movements in the days leading up to Amara's disappearance. They discovered that Gabriel had been living in a small apartment near the Riverwalk Trail. Could this have been the place where he planned and executed his attack on Amara? With this new lead, the search for Gabriel Alvarez took center stage. Law enforcement expanded their efforts, reaching out to local businesses where Gabriel had worked and talking to neighbors who had seen him around town. They also began looking into his social media profiles and personal history, searching for any motive or connection to Amara. As the police worked to track down Gabriel, the town remained on edge. The disappearance of Amara, followed by the discovery of a possible suspect, sent shockwaves through Theodore Springs. People began to look at each other with suspicion. Was the person sitting next to them in the cafe the same person who had abducted Amara? Was someone in their town capable of such a crime? The town's fear deepened as the hunt for Gabriel continued. Would he be caught before he could flee, or was he already gone? Then came the call no one expected. Gabriel Alvarez was missing. Detective Simmons received a call from the local apartment complex where Gabriel had been living. He had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only his belongings. His apartment had been cleared out, his clothes and personal items gone. No one knew where he had gone or how he had vanished. The search for Gabriel had now turned into a manhunt. Was he hiding nearby, or had he fled the town entirely? Amara's family, already reeling from the uncertainty of her disappearance, now had to contend with the terrifying thought that Gabriel was still out there, somewhere, waiting. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on the notification bell and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Detective Carla Simmons stood by the phone, eyes fixed on the screen in front of her. Gabriel Alvarez had left his apartment, disappearing as mysteriously as he had arrived in Theodore Springs months earlier. No one knew where he had gone. No one knew why he had come to town in the first place. But they knew one thing for sure: he had to be found. Local law enforcement, now working in coordination with the FBI, launched a full-scale manhunt. Investigators started by revisiting Gabriel's apartment. What had he left behind? Had he left any traces of where he might have gone next? The apartment complex, once a place where Gabriel had spent his days in obscurity, was now the site of renewed investigations. Everything in his apartment was carefully analyzed. Clothes, personal effects, even his garbage bags. Every scrap was examined for clues. The most telling discovery came from Gabriel's laptop, a small, unassuming device tucked away under his bed. Forensic experts worked through the night, breaking through the security password and beginning to analyze the data inside. His email accounts, web searches, and recent activities began to paint a troubling picture. Gabriel had searched the internet for things like how to disappear without a trace and untraceable routes out of Oregon. These searches indicated one thing: he had been planning his escape. Detective Simmons felt a knot tighten in her chest. Gabriel was no amateur. He had planned this. But what had been his motive for targeting Amara? What did he want from her? And why had he left behind so many telling clues? As investigators continued digging into Gabriel's past and the trail of his disappearance, the police began reaching out to people who had interacted with him in the months leading up to Amara's disappearance. It didn't take long before several neighbors and co-workers came forward, each of them describing Gabriel in the same way: an outsider, someone who never quite seemed to fit in, someone whose actions had always been a little off. Ana Lopez, a waitress at a local diner, recalled seeing Gabriel multiple times in the weeks before Amara went missing. He would come in, sit at the same corner booth and drink his coffee in silence, his eyes never fully meeting hers. He never really talked much, Ana said in a statement, but there was something about the way he stared off into the distance. It made you feel like he was always thinking about something dark. Others described his unpredictable behavior, the way he would sometimes snap at people over the smallest things, his tendency to avoid eye contact, his unease in social settings. It was clear now that Gabriel had been hiding something. But was it just the normal discomfort of an outsider or something more insidious? Investigators also spoke to coworkers from the job Gabriel had held at a local hardware store. A few recalled incidents where Gabriel had acted out of character. One such incident had occurred just days before Amara's disappearance. A store manager described how Gabriel had been asked to leave after an argument with a customer. It wasn't like him, the manager said. He usually kept to himself, but that day he was visibly upset. His hands were shaking. There was a common thread through all the interviews. Gabriel was a loner, but more than that, he was a volatile presence, unpredictable and emotionally distant. With the clues piling up, Gabriel Alvarez's location became a matter of utmost priority. Police tracked his phone signal, hoping to get a lead. They pinged his last known location, a bus station in Portland, Oregon. But when they arrived, Gabriel was already gone. He had left the city the night before, his trail fading faster than the investigators could keep up. The search spread outward, crossing state lines. Portland, Seattle, and even San Francisco became focal points. Gabriel had no known ties to any of these cities, but it was clear he was on the move. Law enforcement turned to federal databases, hoping to find a connection to any past crimes or previous warrants for his arrest. As the investigation moved forward, there were rumors that Gabriel might have been trying to cross the border into Canada or even flee south to Mexico. But every lead, every possible destination, seemed to end in a dead end. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. The breakthrough came when Gabriel's phone was located in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The authorities had been tracking his movements closely, and his phone pinged at a bar in Tulsa. Los Amigos Sports Bar, a place known for cheap drinks and late-night patrons. Gabriel's signal was last detected there, but this time the police were prepared. A team of Tulsa police was dispatched to the bar, and within hours, Gabriel was apprehended. The arrest was swift, but Gabriel fought back. The police found him in a nearby alley, trying to blend in with a crowd of late-night drinkers. When they approached, he ran, but he didn't get far. Gabriel was taken into custody without further incident, and when he was brought into questioning, he remained silent. He refused to give any details about his actions in Theodore Springs. His body language spoke volumes, head down, eyes fixed on the floor, avoiding the officer's gaze. In his possession, authorities found cash, a flight ticket, and a cell phone, but there were no signs of Amara's belongings or any indication of why he had been in such a rush to flee. Despite the mounting evidence against him, Gabriel insisted on his innocence. When he was questioned about his involvement in Amara's disappearance, he denied knowing her, claimed that his DNA must have been planted at the scene, that he had never been to Theodore Springs, and that he had never hurt anyone, but the evidence against him was irrefutable. DNA analysis from the crime scene matched his. Surveillance footage showed him near the trail. Witnesses had seen him in the area, acting suspiciously. Despite Gabriel's protests, the facts remained the same. He had been at the scene and he had run when the police closed in. As Gabriel sat in custody, his fate uncertain, one crucial piece of the puzzle was still missing. Why had he targeted Amara Bennett? What was his connection to her? Was it a random act or had he been stalking her? What had driven him to commit such a violent and senseless act? The answers seemed just out of reach, but the authorities were determined to uncover the truth. They had Gabriel in custody. Now, it was time to learn everything about him, the man behind the crime. The question on everyone's mind was, how long had Gabriel Alvarez been hiding in plain sight, and what other horrors might he have been involved in? Don't forget to subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. The news of Gabriel Alvarez's arrest sent a ripple of both relief and dread through Theodore Springs. Relief that the man responsible for Amara Bennett's disappearance had been caught. Dread because with his arrest came the inevitable. Amara's family would have to face the truth. The truth about what had happened to their mother, their sister, their friend. And they would have to relive her final moments in front of a courtroom filled with strangers, under the harsh glare of the public eye. Amara's death was no longer just a tragedy for her family, it had become a national story, one that would be watched closely by millions. The media descended on Theodore Springs, covering every detail of the trial. The courtroom would be the stage for an emotional reckoning. For Amara's family, the trial began not just as a pursuit of justice, but as a grim journey through the details of a brutal, senseless crime. Amara's children, Isaiah, Ella, and Maya, had already lost their mother. Now, they would be forced to face the horror of her death in a way that no child should ever have to. The court would lay bare the events of that fateful day, and Amara's family would bear witness to the worst of what had happened. The courtroom was packed. It wasn't just the town of Theodore Springs that was in attendance. The eyes of the entire nation were now on this case. News outlets, reporters and cameras lined the back of the room, their flashing lights intermittently casting sharp glows across the somber faces in the gallery. Among those faces were Amara's family, her parents, her children and her husband, Jalen. Jalen, who had once stood beside Amara as they raised their family, now sat alone, his eyes red from sleepless nights, his hands clenched together as he braced himself for the days ahead. Isaiah, Ella and Maya sat beside him, their faces pale and filled with pain, yet determined. They knew this trial would shape the future of their family, but the toll it would take on their hearts and minds was almost too much to comprehend. The prosecution began their opening statements with the weight of the case heavy on their shoulders. District Attorney Maria Davis stood, her voice steady as she addressed the jury. She outlined the gruesome details of Amara's death, the rape, the brutal murder and the callousness of the crime. She described how Amara had been attacked while out on a jog, a place where so many people in Theodore Springs felt safe. The prosecution emphasized the cold, calculated nature of the crime, how Amara had been dragged off the trail, her body left in a secluded spot, hidden away like discarded trash. The words first-degree murder and rape rang through the courtroom, sending waves of pain through Amara's family. It was one thing to know what had happened, but it was another to hear it spoken aloud in such stark, unforgiving terms. Maria Davis then highlighted the evidence, the DNA that linked Gabriel Alvarez to the crime, the witness testimonies, and the security footage that placed him at the scene. She painted a picture of a man who had stalked and attacked Amara with purpose, leaving her no chance for survival. On the other side of the room, Gabriel Alvarez's defense team began their opening statements. Defense attorney James O'Connor was a seasoned lawyer, known for his ability to create doubt even in the most difficult cases. He approached the jury with a calm, measured demeanor, his voice smooth and persuasive. O'Connor's strategy was simple: create doubt. He acknowledged that Gabriel's DNA had been found at the scene but questioned the chain of custody and the reliability of the evidence. He suggested that Gabriel may not have been the sole person involved in Amara's death and that there were other potential suspects, people who had been in the area but hadn't been thoroughly investigated. He also suggested that Gabriel's mental state could have contributed to his actions, arguing that he was under a great deal of stress and confusion at the time. However, the defense's argument felt hollow to those sitting in the gallery. How could they argue that Gabriel's actions were anything but deliberate when the evidence was so clear? For Amara's family, the defense's attempt to downplay Gabriel's involvement only added to their anger. Gabriel had intentionally killed their mother, and now he was trying to avoid full accountability. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on the notification bell and leave your thoughts in the comments below. As the trial continued, forensic experts and investigators took the stand to present the damning evidence against Gabriel. DNA expert Dr. Linda Carson testified about the DNA samples found at the crime scene, explaining how Gabriel's DNA matched perfectly with samples taken from Amara's body. The jury listened intently as Dr. Carson described the precision of the analysis, the rigorous methods used to ensure the evidence was indisputable. Then came the video evidence, security footage from the Riverwalk Trail showing Gabriel in the area. The video was grainy, but it was clear enough to show him walking in the vicinity around the time Amara would have been jogging. The defense tried to discredit the footage, but it was impossible to ignore. The images were chilling, a man with no apparent connection to Amara, yet he was there at the scene just before she disappeared. As the trial neared its end, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. The jury deliberated for hours, and the courtroom remained in a state of suspended animation. Amara's family, their faces etched with grief and exhaustion, sat in silence. The pain of the trial had brought them to the edge, but they knew that justice for Amara was finally within reach. When the jury returned with their verdict, the room held its collective breath. The words came down slowly, each one heavy with consequence. Guilty. First-degree murder. Rape. A rush of emotions swept over Amara's family. Relief but also deep sorrow. Gabriel Alvarez would never be free again, but for Amara's children, their mother would never be back. Justice had been served, but the ache of her loss could never be filled. But the relief of the verdict was bittersweet. The judge looked at Gabriel Alvarez and asked if he had any final words. His voice was quiet, barely audible. "I didn't do it," he muttered, his eyes downcast, not meeting anyone's gaze. As the judge gave the sentencing, Gabriel was led away in handcuffs. His fate was but for Amara's family, the pain was far from over. The trial had ended, but they now faced the difficult journey of rebuilding their lives, carrying the weight of a loss they would never fully recover from. As the courtroom emptied, Amara's children held each other close, their tears mingling with the relief of justice. But the question remained, what happens now? How could they move forward when the person they loved most was gone forever? The courtroom was silent. Gabriel Alvarez, once the face of uncertainty and fear in Theodore Springs, now stood in shackles as the judge read out the verdict that would define the rest of his life. Guilty. First-degree murder. First-degree rape. Kidnapping. The words felt like a weight lifted from Amara Bennett's family, but also a heavy reminder that no amount of justice could bring back their beloved mother. For Jalen, Amara's husband, the finality of the verdict was a bittersweet relief. His grief, the pain of losing his wife in such a violent and senseless way, could never be erased by a conviction. Yet, there was a strange sense of justice that filled the room as the judge sentenced Gabriel Alvarez to life without the possibility of parole. It was a sentence that would ensure Gabriel would never harm anyone again. But the emptiness in Jalen's heart remained. As Gabriel was led away in handcuffs, Amara's children sat together, their faces still tear-streaked but filled with a quiet determination. Isaiah, her oldest son, had been the first to testify in the trial, the one who had spoken about his mother's disappearance and the agony he had felt. Ella and Maya, though young, had been the pillars of strength for their family in the days since Amara's death. Now they would hold on to the fragile sense of closure the verdict had brought them. But justice was never a clean solution, was it? Justice couldn't bring back Amara's laughter, her warmth, or the way she had held their family together. For her children, this trial had been about more than simply seeking justice. It had been about honoring her memory. And now, with the trial over, the real challenge began: learning how to live without her. In the wake of the trial's conclusion, Jalen, along with his children, began to channel their grief into something meaningful. They became advocates, fighting to ensure that Amara's death would not be in vain. They joined local organizations working to improve the safety of women in public spaces and began speaking out about the importance of vigilance. Their efforts weren't just about ensuring the legacy of Amara Bennett lived on, they were about making sure that what happened to her could never happen again. The town of Theodore Springs became a focal point for discussions about public safety. Amara's family spoke to local schools, town meetings, and statewide events. They raised awareness about the need for better lighting on jogging trails, increased police patrols, and better surveillance in public spaces. They talked about the need to change the way women were perceived in public, how the world had to stop seeing them as vulnerable targets, but instead take proactive measures to protect them. The hashtag Justice for Amara campaign began trending on social media, inspiring others who had lost loved ones to similar crimes to come forward and share their stories. Amara's family, though grieving, found purpose in the fight to protect others. They were determined to create positive change, using their pain as fuel for something greater. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more true crime content like the video, and comment below with your thoughts on the case. Your support means a lot.